Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and when we last left Cleburne, he was around Tullahoma, Tennessee, but the Union Army was beginning to lurch forward. The troops that Cleburne stationed at Liberty Gap became overwhelmed by an advancing Union force, and before Cleburne could mount an offensive against the approaching Federals, Bragg had ordered a retreat. The Irishman and his troops fell back, acting as a rear guard of the army as it crossed the Duck River. Along his path was Cheatham's division, and some of the divisional wagons had become disabled. Instead of moving them off to the side of the road, which was customary, they attempted to repair them on site. This infuriated Cleburne, and he ordered them to move, but they would not take orders from him. Patrick sent a letter off to Hardee, then he sent a letter off to Bragg, who ordered Polk to abandon the wagons that were disabled. The Army of Tennessee concentrated at Tullahoma, and Bragg contemplated engaging with Rosecrans' army there, but both Hardee and Polk agreed that the location would be untenable and to pull back further. Again, Cleburne and his troops left the ground to the enemy. He acted as the rear guard again for the army as they crossed Elk River and made it to Chattanooga. While the Army of Tennessee was moving toward Chattanooga, General Pemberton was surrendering to Grant at Vicksburg, and Robert E. Lee was leaving Pennsylvania defeated after the Battle of Gettysburg. Cleburne's division was tasked with guarding north of the city, where Bragg anticipated an attack to come from. The Army commander wagered that the Union Army would attack from that direction because Union General Ambrose Burnside was operating in Kentucky, and coordination between the two Federal forces seemed the most logical. Hardee left the corps in the hands of Cleburne when he traveled to meet with Bragg in Chattanooga. Cleburne became terribly stressed during this time as an acting corps commander, so much so that one of his staff commented that he would rather attack a lion in his lair than approach Cleburne. The paperwork seemed overwhelming, and it was constant. The Irishman was energetic when it came to physical army duties, but he became utterly exhausted at the amount of paperwork expected of him. The situation would get worse for him because after a week of visiting with Bragg in Chattanooga, General Hardee was dispatched to Mississippi to provide help to Johnston. It was highly likely that Bragg hoped that once he got rid of Breckinridge and Hardee, that much of the attacks on him would stop, but that would not be the case. The new corps commander would come from the east, General Daniel Harvey Hill, who had known Bragg in the old army and was now one of his corps commanders. Hill spent a lot of time in Chattanooga conversing with the army commander, which left Cleburne in an acting role. Hill became disenchanted with Bragg as a commander. The constant advising done by Hill told the corps commander that Bragg did not have an overall strategy for the coming campaign. Conversely, Hill got along with Cleburne, and Cleburne treated Hill with the same respect as he did Hardee. While stationed above Chattanooga, Cleburne began to visit the Masonic Lodge in Tyner Station. The camaraderie and fraternal order gave him the inspiration to start a fraternal order for the Confederate armies, called Comrades of the Southern Cross. All free white males over the age of 18 who were serving or who had served in any of the Confederate armies would be welcome, and the dues paid would help support wounded veterans, widows, and orphans. He also hoped that it would foster camaraderie and patriotism between the serving Confederate soldiers. In late August 1863, Cleburne saw and heard Union soldiers working feverishly at various fords on the Tennessee River in his sector. As he peered through his field glasses at the blue troops, an artillery shell came soaring through the air and landed 3 feet in front of him, but didn't explode. The Irishman looked at the shell and then raised his binoculars back up to his face. This incident truly illustrates Cleburne's calmness when it came to combat. Despite the hard work of the Federal troops, it was all a ruse. Rosecrans' army crossed downriver on August 26th and was pushing east to cut off Bragg's line of retreat. The commander of the Army of Tennessee changed his mind multiple times even after having a council of war, but ultimately decided to retreat. On September 7th, Cleburne's division led the army south on the Lafayette Road, again abandoning more territory, this time the entire state of Tennessee. Since leaving Tullahoma, Cleburne's division had been reorganized. Liddell's brigade was no longer in his division, and Churchill had been sent to the Trans-Mississippi Department, although his brigade remained with Cleburne under the command of James Deschler. Sterling Wood's brigade remained in the division, and Wood himself had proved reliable in battle. Lucius Polk, who acted as Cleburne's right arm, was still with the division. Bragg knew that Rosecrans had to cross Lookout Mountain and utilized the gaps in the ridge to do so. Therefore, he wanted his divisions to trap part of Rosecrans' advancing army and defeat it in detail. Major General James S. Negley's division of George Thomas's corps traveled through Stevens Gap into McLemore's Cove, a prime target for the Confederate forces. On the night of September 9th, Bragg ordered General Heineman's division to attack the prone Union force and then ordered Cleburne's division to attack the Federal force in the rear. Cleburne set up his division at Dug Gap, ready to deliver a decisive blow whenever Heineman engaged the enemy. Bragg came to Dug Gap to watch the trap be sprung. As the day wore on, no sound of battle came from the direction of Heineman, and by now more and more blue troops filed into the cove. Bragg, in a fit of anxiety and restlessness, drove his spur into the ground, illustrating his frustration. The Irishman waited until after 4 p.m., when skirmishing was heard to the north. The division went into battle line and advanced into McLemore's Cove, but it was too late. George Thomas had pulled his troops back to the safety of Stevens Gap. The opportunity had been missed. For a week, Cleburne and his men remained at the gaps in Pigeon Mountain watching McLemore's Cove. The division commander slept on the ground in a thin blanket. One morning he woke up at dawn, stood, stretched, shook his blanket, and was startled to see a large rattlesnake drop out of it. On September 19th, Bragg ordered Cleburne to proceed with his division north to link up with the rest of the army. Covering over 6 miles, the Irishman's troops made it to the Confederate right near sunset, forming up behind St. John Liddell's men. Heavy fighting had already occurred that day, so the smell of gunpowder hung in the air. Liddell, now a division commander, rode up to Cleburne and urged him to attack, but Cleburne didn't know the ground and hadn't been given an order from his superiors to attack. When D.H. Hill approached, Liddell convinced the North Carolinian to send in Cleburne's division. Liddell looked at Cleburne and said, "General, I hope you will be quick, for a minute now will be worth an hour tomorrow."